This is you. This is your sister, your wife, your daughter, but this right here is you.
In 1925, German satirist Kurt Tucholsky wrote something that later got misattributed to Stalin. One man's death is a tragedy. 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. He was pointing out something about human nature. Our empathy doesn't scale. Raw numbers make us turn away. For proof, simply observe how Mel Gibson responds to the number 2 million.
Fuck you and your 2 million.
I'm not going to address how he reacts to the number 6 million. Kurt Tucholsky was making a cynical point about human psychology. We don't feel the scale of mass suffering the way we feel one face, one story. This is a photo from the July 4th ball at the Overlook Hotel from the year 1921. Everyone in this photo is dead. Now, most of us don't grieve much at all upon hearing that. But what if I told you a story? The story of the caretaker at the hotel, a man named Jack, a dedicated author, a family man, a recovering alcoholic who was abandoned by his family in a hedge maze and left to freeze to death like some mangy beast. Stories like this appeal to pathos, the stories that shape how we feel. Anne Frank, Viktor Frankl, Frank Costanza. You can read that 3,000 people died on September 11th, but it is the visuals and the stories that make it a tragedy. Think of a charity poster. They don't show you charts about famine. They show you one hungry child. You don't weep for 50,000. You weep for one. The Bible leans on stories of individuals. Job's suffering becomes the story of all of human suffering. But perhaps no story hits harder than the story of a parent losing a son. In the book of Samuel, King David mourns the loss of his son, Absalom, despite the latter's rebellion and attempt to seize his father's throne. The story of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 22 foreshadows the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And the most famous line in the New Testament declares, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son." Christianity itself is structured around the pain of a father losing his child.
I saw somebody say today, was it King John? They killed our son. Boy, do I feel that.
This moral expansiveness map comes from a study called Ideological Differences in the Expanse of the Moral Circle, published in Nature Communications in 2019. The conservative heat map shows more concentration on inner closer circles, more concern for family, close community.
If you kill our stranger, we might be mad, but we'll probably not change our schedule over it. If you kill our son, all of our son, we're going to change our schedule.
And while the map appears to show that liberals tend to prioritize marginalized people, non-human life, and global issues, it is interesting to note that 13 years ago, Democratic President Barack Obama spoke about Trayvon Martin in a similar manner to how Scott Adams spoke about Charlie Kirk in 2025. He talked about a son.
But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
At the time, Obama's comment drew criticism from some conservatives. Newt Gingrich called the remark disgraceful. He asked whether the president was implying that if a white teenager had been shot, it would be less of an issue. The answer to Newt's question might lie in evolutionary psychology, which shows that humans evolved in small kin groups, where loyalty meant survival. Studies show men are more likely to invest time and resources in children they believe resemble them. One study even found that children who look more like their father are healthier, presumably because they receive more paternal care. Hollywood knows this theme of the dead son well. Think of Gladiator. Maximus loses his wife and son, and his whole story becomes revenge.
Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Think of the movie Ransom. Mel Gibson's son is kidnapped, and his rage drives the plot.
Give me back my son!
Writers say there's no pain deeper than the loss of a child. Psychologists back this up. Parents who lose a child often describe it as a wound that never fully heals.
This is your sister, your wife, your daughter. This is you.
And it isn't only sons. In King Lear, it is the daughter Cordelia's loss that breaks the old king. Christopher Nolan returns to this motif again and again. The dead wife in Memento, the drowning wife in The Prestige, the ghost of Mal in Inception.
What do you feel?
The David Fincher movie Seven ends with Brad Pitt's character broken by the death of his wife. We return to this story because it's effective.
This is your sister, your wife, your daughter.
The death isn't just one of Stalin's statistics.
Your wife.
It's moved to a different area of the heat map. It's a member of our tribe. It's a story we can feel. In the movie Seven, Brad Pitt's character responds to tragedy with vengeance. And despite the gruesome nature of his act, every single person in the movie theater understands. In 1984, Gary Plauché shot and killed his son's molester, right there in an airport, pretending to take a phone call. His act was shocking. One father, one son, one perpetrator. In 1980, John Gotti's son was struck and killed by a car. By all accounts, an accident. But Gotti wasn't an ordinary father. He was the boss of the Gambino crime family. The man who struck his son vanished, never seen again. Gotti had disproportionate power. His grief became a weapon. Revenge wasn't just personal. It was a message to the whole city. But before people act out revenge, they would be wise to play the tape all the way through. In 1992, John Gotti was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He spent the majority of his sentence in effective solitary confinement, away from his family, his children, his grandchildren, before dying in 2002.
I got nothing. I got no group picture.
In Memento, Leonard thinks he's avenging his wife. But in his grief, he manipulates himself into chasing an illusion.
Your wife.
His whole life becomes a loop of violence and self-deception. A parable for what happens when vengeance becomes our only story.
Your wife.
The Bible contains impulses for both wrath and forgiveness. There are Old Testament passages that imagine God's vengeance, justice executed against wrongdoers. But there are also powerful calls to restraint and mercy. Jesus teaching forgiveness, turning the other cheek. Those two scriptural strains have lived uneasily together in moral imagination for millennia. Tucholsky was right. Numbers don't move us, stories do. But the danger is when someone only thinks about a scene from the story. He envisions himself as the macho man, but he fails to think about the grand narrative, God's plan, the universe's plan. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold. But oftentimes the man who serves the cold dish ends up eating nothing but prison dishes for the balance of his days. Just ask John Gotti.
I got nothing.
This is you.